The following podcast is a deep, shallow dive production.
And you're gonna love it.
Okay, let's go.
All right, Matt, I'm going to start off with something kind of funny because this episode's going to be so deep and so serious, but there is a hilarious trend on TikTok, and it must have been started by a ginger, a guy with red hair like yourself and a nice flowing red beard. But basically the trend is that ginger people are the black people of white people. And it ended up creating these absolutely hilarious videos where the gingers were so happy they get to consider themselves black. And then the black people were welcoming the gingers into the community. So anyway, congratulations. You are black. You are part of the black community. All right.
Does it get all the perks?
I
Do I get the
so.
perks?
I hope so.
No?
I hope so. You get there. You go.
If
There
so,
you go.
I'm in.
Sounds good. All right, listen, man, I am super excited about this. Let me set the stage, everybody. We've got Matt Cubbler. Is it Cubbler or Kubler? How do you pronounce it? Kubler. Okay.
It's Kubler, but it doesn't
All
really
right,
matter.
listen, Matt Cubbler, I got connected with Matt through our guy, J Slay USA, Jeremy Sladen, and Matt is a 30-year law enforcement officer. He was a Federal Air Marshal after 9/11, which, holy shit, that's interesting. And then 4 years active duty Army intel and also a Persian Gulf War veteran. And with that being said, this is going to be the first of probably a couple episodes with Matt. But today, we're going to specifically talk about Navy SEALs and the concept of, God, two things. One, what took place with Osama bin Laden and SEAL Team 6 and all of that. And then secondly, Matt had a close friend who was in SEAL Team 4 and Jobe Price. Does he pronounce his name Jobe? Okay.
Correct.
Jobe Price, who while on active duty as a Navy SEAL in Afghanistan, and I'm going to use air quotes, supposedly committed suicide, which made no real sense. And even for me, with everything I've looked at, makes absolutely no sense. And so Matt was hired by Jobe's family to investigate that. And so we're going to talk about that as well. But first off, man, give us, and remember, we're trying to take a 30,000 foot view today, but give us what the hell are the Navy SEALs, and then distinguish between, like, is there a pecking order, SEAL Team 2, SEAL Team 4, and then it seems like SEAL Team 6 are like the baddest of the bad. So let's lay that groundwork first of all.
Yeah, I mean, SEAL teams are part of the special forces of our military. Yeah, Army Green Berets, Army Rangers, they're the equivalent to the regular SEALs. And then you have Delta Force, which is equivalent to SEAL Team 6. Those are they're called Tier 1 units, which means the top of the top. So Delta Force for the Army, Navy SEAL, SEAL Team 6 for the Navy. And then the other SEAL teams are broken down. There's 10 total, and they have geographical responsibilities. SEAL Team 6 is more hostage rescue type of higher profile type missions they'll go on because they have a different skill set. And then they're called white side teams, the regular Navy SEALs, like Jobe was a commander of SEAL Team 4. They had Central America as their focus. So like each team has their own specialty.
And then is it like who's the baddest of the bad of all those guys? Like if you had to pick Delta Force, okay, and Delta Force you said is the Army. Okay.
Yep. Well, it's anybody. So it's controlled by the Army, but you don't even have to even be in the Army. You could literally come in off the streets and be selected to try out for Delta Force and become a member of Delta Force without having served in the military. Broad of a net they cast. They're trying to get the best of the best. And it's, the difference between SEAL teams and Delta Force is Delta Force to get in is a individual effort. Navy SEALs is all team-based. Delta Force wants a bunch of individually motivated, critical thinkers, problem solvers, and physically fit and mentally tough people from all Navy SEALs have become Delta Force, Marine Force Recon, like I said, civilians. So they accept everybody, where the Navy SEAls don't.
So Delta Force is like the baddest of the bad. Are there any like famous Delta Force people we would know? Like, was Sean Ryan Delta Force? Was Jocko Willink
No, he was
Navy SEAL?
Navy SEAL.
Okay, those guys are all Navy SEAL. Yeah.
What is the reason for that?
Oh, okay.
They don't talk. There's not a lot of shit talking fame seekers. I mean, that just doesn't exist. It's very much frowned upon within the Delta Force community. Now, there are guys that are retired that a good buddy of mine, Dale Comstock, who I always say the only person Chuck Norris is afraid of is Dale Comstock. He's retired Delta Force.
Wow.
His resume is legit badass, and he's got a book, America Badass is the title of his book. So there are guys out there who were Delta Force. A lot of guys that were involved in Black Hawk Down in Mogadishu back in 92 or 93, whenever that was. A lot of guys that were part of the Greater War on Terror, GWAT, which is the after 9/11 to the pullout of Afghanistan. Essentially, there's not a lot of Delta guys that are coming out.
Okay, so the dudes that are Delta Force, they are not the guys that are looking for the attention post-military career, but these are like killers, right? Like these are people that just, are killers.
Well, there's a main guy that's out now. There's one that's getting a lot of attention, whether or not, and I don't know him. I've never met him. I've talked to people who know him. They say he's legit. But John Shrek McPhee, he's doing all the big show talking circuit now, talking about his time and early on in the GWAT era, the Battle of Tora Bora, which was the first attempt to get bin Laden, that they were told to stand down on after they found him. There were two Black Hawks type helicopters that came in and left, and nobody really knows who they were with, and bin Laden was gone. According to John Shrek McPhee.
All right, so give us your overall thoughts, because you've really researched the SEAL teams a lot. Like, do you have, I guess, your overall thoughts on them before we get into Rob O'Neill, whom, by the way, I've played Rob has a clip on the internet that's gone viral crazy times, and I might even interject it here into this podcast, but he basically talks about how, had he met the guy that he broke into someone's room at 2 a.m. and killed this guy. And it's like, what if I met this guy in Paris? What if I had a cup of coffee with this guy? I probably would like this guy.
I'm to the point now where I don't think I fought for the country. I fought for some politician's view on something. There are particular guys that I think of that I killed. And I remember one dude in particular that I killed, and I shot his buddy. And then I came through his room. I killed him in front of his wife in a bedroom because he went for a gun. And I think about him now, and it's like, all right, why did I kill that guy? Well, because he went for a gun. Okay, but why did he go for a gun? Well, because I was in his fucking room at 2 a.m. Well, why was I in his room at 2 a.m? Well, because George fucking Bush was pissed that Saddam Hussein allegedly wanted to kill his dad, so we invaded. And then I start to think, was this guy funny? What if I met him in Paris over a coffee? Would we have actually liked each other and I just kill him because a politician sent us here for weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist? The only reason we were killing each other is because we were born on different parts of the world. That's it. Yeah.
So he's gotten a lot of notoriety for that, and then in general. But your overall thoughts on the Navy SEALs?
We'll address that comment you just made about Rob O'Neill when we talk about Rob O'Neill. But so here's my thoughts on the Navy SEALs. I know a lot of really good, outstanding men who are Navy SEALs. Quiet professionals, did a lot of great things for our country, are embarrassed by the notoriety, the unwanted notoriety of their community, such as, Mark Luttrell and others, Rob O'Neill, who didn't do what the world thinks they did. So I want to lead with, there are a lot of good guys in the teams. Fortunately, when I say the John Chapman incident in 2002, March 4th, where Air Force Combat Controller John Chapman heroically saved the lives of SEAL Team 6 as an attached member of that unit, landing on a mountain, which they weren't supposed to land on, but he did some heroic stuff. And then the SEALs ended up stealing his valor and attributing it to one of their own. And turned into a whole big brouhaha.
This
But
is
since
this
then,
is
so
a guy
March of
named John
2002 until
Chapman who
now,
was not a Navy SEAL. What was he?
Air Force Combat Controller, which is the guy that controls the air and calls in the bomb and strikes and all that kind of stuff. And almost all the special operations units have if they're flying into wherever they're going, has a combat controller with them. But since 2002 until now, the SEALs have created what I call the brand. And it's become this intricate, sophisticated criminal syndicate where they are able to take failures in missions and turn them into successes by controlling the narrative and then promoting and awarding those who were on the mission, who specifically failed the most. And that is a trend that started with John Chapman and Roberts Ridge. If anybody wants to Google John Chapman Medal of Honor, he's a Congressional Medal of Honor recipient, posthumously, because he died on the mountain that day. So dead men tell no tales. But there was a book written about it, Alone at Dawn. There's plenty of verifiable proof that what he did was the only heroism on the mountain that day, other than another guy named Neil Roberts. But the one who they're claiming had the valor, Brett Slabinski, is the stolen valor guy who helped to cover up and besmirch John Chapman's name. So during the GWAT era, I call it, the original sin was the Roberts Ridge John Chapman incident, and they've been perfecting the ability to change narratives, cover up, award, and promote over the last 20 years. So sadly, it's not a small group of people. It's a powerful group of people within the Navy SEAL community, both retired and active, who control all of the narrative of the Navy SEAL brand. And those that know it exists and say nothing are just as complicit as those who did the acts. And I've been very clear on that. I don't have any patience at this point in time for anybody who wants to stay in the shadows because they're afraid. Fuck you. I'm afraid. I'm a goddamn nobody who's been deep into this shit for 6 years. I don't have anything to stand on other than my integrity and the things that I've learned. These SEALs need to stand up and speak. And I've had plenty that will and have, but
okay, all right. I want to get to that in a second. Okay, let's talk about. I'll probably put this link in the description for this episode. But you did an episode with Jeremy on his J Slay USA, where it was you and Rob O'Neill. And Rob O'Neill, again, is the Navy SEAL that is credited to being the one who actually shot Osama bin Laden and killed Osama bin Laden, correct? That's his claim.
That's his claim, correct.
All right, dude. Floor is yours, man. Tell us what you think happened, because I will say this. I watched the first, I think you might have done multiple episodes with Rob and Jeremy, and I watched the first one, and I don't know, man. There were some things that seemed like you and Jeremy caught Rob on. So just, dude, it's all yours. Tell us what you think.
Well, I'll lead with this. O'Neill is, by all accounts, minus if you took the Osama bin Laden raid out, was an exceptional Navy SEAL. I will lead, and I said that to him. I said, he said he did over 400 missions. I said, well, for 399 of them, thank you. For this one, we don't agree on what the truth is. Rob will consistently say that the Navy SEALs approved his book that he wrote. There were 2 books written from that mission. One was written by Mark Owen, whose real name is Matt Bissonnette, who was a member of SEAL Team 6.
Bissonnette?
And Rob O'Neill.
Okay. It's funny, during that episode with Jeremy, you guys kept saying Matt, and I thought they were talking about you. So then I realized, oh shit, that's a totally different Matt. Okay. So there were 2 books written. Rob's book said he killed him, because obviously it's his book. And then you're saying there's another book from Matt, who was also a Navy SEAL 6 on that same mission. Holy shit.
Correct. So everyone before that mission had to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Matt Bissonnette did not get Navy Special Warfare or the Department of Navy's approval to write his book. He did not ask for a waiver of the NDA. Rob did. Now, what the government does when you write a book, they're not checking it for facts. They're checking it to make sure you're not disclosing any confidential classified information, and that you're not releasing any tactics training and tactics and trainings and principles, TTPs, in it. So nothing that would expose what you do for a living to someone else that they could then use against you. So when Rob says his book was the only one approved, it was, but not for what the content was. It was just approved because they said there was no classified information and no TTPs. So he's very, he says a partial truth, but doesn't give the contextual details of how it was approved. So we talked about Jobe Price a little bit. Getting involved in his investigation by his family asking me to look at it exposed me to all of this information. So trying to track down stuff about Jobe opened up doors to other Navy SEAL incidents and people that wanted to talk to me about.
And again, just so I can make sure the audience is following along, Jobe Price is your friend from high school who became part of SEAL Team 4. Jobe Price was a commander. Okay,
he was a top dog.
That's a big dog. So, but Jobe was not involved with SEAL Team 6 in the Osama bin Laden raid. What you're saying is, in the process of investigating Jobe's suicide / potential homicide, you basically uncovered and sort of pulled the curtain behind or away from all the crazy stuff that the SEALs do. And then this Osama bin Laden situation with SEAL Team 6 was one of the main ones. But the two are totally separate, right?
Correct.
Okay, got
totally
it.
different.
All right, go on. Let's do the Osama bin Laden, then we'll do
the
Jobe.
Key distinction is, while being exposed to all this stuff, people want to tell me things. As I'm investigating one thing, people want to talk about other things. And because I'm good at investigating, they want me to investigate those things because they want to utilize my skills. When it came to Rob O'Neill, Jeremy had done a video, I don't know, a year before, 8 months before, whatever it was it really Osama bin Laden that was killed on that raid? Rob O'Neill was following Jeremy apparently and commented in the comments on an IG Instagram post. I then took that as an opportunity to troll Rob and dropped a couple little nuggets about what I knew without going into real detail. And that got Jeremy's attention. And I had never met Jeremy. So Jeremy and I connected. I went on a show a few times that year. And then, in January of 24, he texted me and says, "Do you want to interview Rob O'Neill on my show?" So I said, sure, I certainly would. So I had information given to me about that raid that was not public knowledge. I knew the names of some people whose names are not public knowledge. And I had privy to a recorded debrief that occurred immediately after the raid and the contents of that. So Rob didn't know this, but it was supposed to be a debate between he and I is what it was set up as. Rob to this day says that it was an ambush. It wasn't. We have group text chats that show exactly what the plan was. He was on board. So much so that he did 2 more interviews afterwards. So we get on the interview, and my goal was to let Rob talk because Rob loves to talk. Rob wants to tell his story. He's told the story thousands of times. I've watched every video he ever did in an interview, and no one had ever challenged him on any of the facts of the incident itself. I went into it as an investigator, not as a conspiracy theorist, which I am, but both. I enjoy going down rabbit holes. However, for the context of that interview, I was coming at it straight as if Osama bin Laden was there and Osama bin Laden was killed. So then the crux of the conversation was who did what. So Rob had always given the same basic blueprint towards what happened up until the point where he shot Osama bin Laden in the head. There's always a couple little nuanced, more theatrical pieces he throws in depending on the audience he's talking to. But for the most part, everything's the same. And what he says is that as they enter the building in the complex, going up to the second floor, the point man, who I have identified as Red, and I know his real name, calls out Khalid bin Laden's son, who was hiding behind a banister, in 2 different languages. He pokes his head over, shoots him in the head. They get up to the second floor. Everyone other than Red clears and does their work on that second floor, while Red and then Rob moves up into the second position.
So this Red guy shot Khalid bin Laden in the head, Osama's kid. Is that true?
Yep.
That's fact.
That's
okay.
fact.
Okay.
Yes.
How old was Khalid bin Laden when he shot him?
Not very old. Probably 20s or early 30s. I'm guessing.
Okay, but he wasn't a 5-year-old kid. He was like in his 20s.
No.
Okay,
he was a warfighter. Yeah. So in Rob's version, he never says Red's name ever. He's never acknowledged Red exists or who Red is and whether there was even a Red on the mission. He always says
and
the point man.
There's a Red. You know that for sure. But 100%. By the way, Red is not public knowledge for people, right? And Red, whoever that is, he hasn't come out. And obviously, I don't want you to expose him because I don't want to get in trouble. Yeah.
I'd go to prison.
And I'd probably get unalived.
So Rob always uses the term point man. And in his story, there's never been any deviation from the point man that shot Khalid bin Laden and the point man who he went up to the third floor to kill bin Laden with. It's always been, there's never been a new point man or the point man who shot and did something else and a new guy went up. There's never any separation between the 2 point men. So he tells his story. Point man kills Khalid. They move up to the third floor. He has a little conversation with the point man. Point man wants to go. Rob wants to wait for a couple more guys. The two of them go up the stairs. They go through a little curtain. Point man tackles a couple, 2, 3 women who Rob says was a act of heroism, should get the Medal of Honor because they could have had suicide vests. And then he turns right, and standing there is Amal, who is bin Laden's wife, short little framed woman, and bin Laden, who is 6'5" or whatever he was. He says within a second he recognized it was him, put 2 in his forehead and 1 in his head again when he was on the ground. So
that's Rob's
that was his story.
Rob's story. Okay, yeah, and I've heard that. Basically, he turned around. There's bin Laden. I've heard him say, "Man, he was a lot taller than I expected." And then, I put 2 in his forehead. He fell, and then I put 1 in his head again. And then what did he shoot Amal?
Correct.
What was the deal with Amal, the wife?
So we asked that question, and he said, well, she was shot in the leg. And I'm like, so she was shot while she was standing there? Like, she was physically already wounded when she was standing in front of her husband? Yes. I'm like, with a 5.56 round to her leg, she's standing stoically in front of her husband? Yes. I said, who shot her? He goes, I didn't shoot her. I said, okay, do we know who did? I don't. He goes, I didn't shoot her. And he just kept saying that, I didn't shoot her. I said, okay. And this is when I start to then go and break down his story and introduce what I know. And I said, so we're going up to the second floor. The point man, Red, kills Khalid
the son,
bin Laden.
By the way, did
Amal
bin Laden die too? So the wife, she's alive.
No, she's alive.
Okay.
She's alive.
What does she say happened?
And
Has she been on record saying this is what really happened?
Yeah. Yeah. She says that she was, that a group of SEALs entered the room and she was shot in the leg and she went down and played dead. And when she opened her eyes, her husband was on the ground dying. That's kind of her version. There's no one man enters the room like Rob O'Neill says. It was a group of SEALs came in and killed my husband.
Okay. Let me ask you this question and then we'll get back. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you don't find it weird that they didn't kill her? Like, why wouldn't they? I would think they would have just ended her too.
Yeah. And we'll get into what I think really happened on that mission outside of the facts of who was there and who did what. So in Rob's version, and when I started to break down what he said, I said, so Red goes up to the second floor, kills Khalid, and then he moves up to the third floor. And I said, you've said in many interviews in the past that the point man shot rounds up to the third floor. And I said, when Red shot those rounds, what happened to those rounds? He goes, I'm not saying it was Red or any other name. I'm not identifying anybody. I said, well, I don't need you to. I know his name. I know what he did. And his call sign was Red. And if you want, I'll text you his name. And he says, no, I believe you. He says, but I don't know whether or not the same guy going up to the second floor was the same guy that went to the third floor. There may have been a switch. I said, you have never once in any interview you've ever done made any distinction between the point men. Now, all of a sudden, because I'm identifying him as Red, you're telling me there was a switch. And he goes, well, I'm not 100% sure. I said, well, I was on SWAT. Granted, I'm not a tier 1 operator, but it's still the same concept where we all wear uniforms, fatigues with a external body armor with stuff all over it, radios, grenades, whatever. I said, I know every member of my SWAT team, front, back, sideways, upside down, inside out. I can identify them by if they're standing 10 feet away from me with their backs turned. I said, you're SEAL Team 6. You train together all the time. You're telling me you didn't know who your point man was. He's like, I'm just saying I think there might have been a switch. So that's sort of his deflection away from acknowledging that Red was the point man going up to the second floor and trying to change the fact that Red was also the person that went up into the third. So I said, well, okay. So then you and Red go up to the third floor. He supposedly dives on a couple women to save everybody's lives. And you turn the corner and kill bin Laden. Yes. I said, how did Amal get shot?
Yeah.
I didn't shoot her. I said, okay. So what happened to the rounds that Red shot up, the 2 rounds that Red shot up the stairs? Who were they at and where did they go? I said, is he a bad shot? I said, because based on what you just said, he was a skilled
I can't imagine any of these guys are bad shots. Yeah.
They're all the best.
Yeah.
They're the best. And I'm like, I said, was it like 50 feet, the stairwell going to the third floor? He goes, no, it's like 8 steps. So 15 feet, right? 20 feet.
Yeah,
Nobody was
I
missing
could probably
anything.
make
So
that
I said,
shot.
what
I could
happened
probably
to
make
those
that
rounds?
shot.
And I said, the void here, the delta here, the thing that's causing me as an investigator to look at this and question your story is that nobody is accounting for those rounds. And nobody cares about those rounds, clearly, because no one's ever talked about it. I said, where did those rounds go? I said, because here's what I've been told. I've been told that Red shot Osama bin Laden as he stepped out from the doorway to see what was going on, shot him once in the chest and once in the hip. I said, he went down on the ground. You walked in, put a bunch of rounds into him. I said, but I was told you weren't even number 2 in this stack. You were number 4. And there's multiple different reportings on that has Rob as one of the 4 that went in, but he was not the number 2 man like he says. He gets all flustered again. I know what I saw. I'm the only person that can tell you what happened. I'm the eyewitness. I'm the guy that shot him. I'm your best source. And I said, well, I would disagree. I have a bunch of sources. I said, and we'll talk about the next thing. I said, let's talk about the mission itself. I said, you were flying in on these stealth Blackhawks. I said, well, they really were just Blackhawks with a new electronics package that helped to block the radar from identifying them. But the function is the same helicopter. I said, you fly in 90 minutes from Afghanistan into Pakistan. I said, 2 helicopters, you fly in, one of them crashes immediately upon entry into the compound area. I said, that makes a loud noise, I'm going to assume. I said, and then you guys deviate, change your plan. You have to use C4 to blow a bunch of holes in a bunch of things.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of noise. I said, and you're in the house and you're shooting guns, even though no one's shooting at you, which is a very distinct point, that they didn't get shot at. They just shot people. And that makes a lot of noise. And then supposedly people from the town were coming outside to see what all the noise was about. And the mission was supposed to take 30 to 35 minutes, but you were on the ground for a total of 47. And then you blow the helicopter up completely when you're leaving, and then you fly 90 minutes back. And during that entire time, not 1 second of military or law enforcement presence.
And by the way, they flew into the Osama bin Laden compound, and I've seen pictures of this thing, man. It's just goofy to me. The whole thing is goofy. But was this at 2:00 in the morning? Was this had to be in the middle of the night, right? This wasn't during the. Okay, it was middle of the night.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the whole nobody responding is also a big indicator, and that'll get into the conspiracy side of me. But how does the most wanted man on the planet not have a well-armed guard contingent to protect him? Number one. Number two, that no one within the Pakistani intelligence service, Pakistani military, the Pakistani law enforcement, nobody came to respond to all this explosions going on in an area where everybody
and I forget
knew bin Laden was
what year was this?
Right,
2009, 11. Okay. So
2011,
Obama, during
11.
Obama time. Okay, got it.
Yes, definitely. It was right before the election. So they fly back to Jalalabad, I believe, first, and they have a debriefing with just the guys on the ground. The ground force commander, which was Command Master Chief Jeff Peeler, and everybody on SEAL Team 6 had a recorded debrief. And in that recorded debrief, Rob O'Neill does not admit, when they ask everybody what they did inside, he does not say he killed bin Laden. He says, we went up to the 3rd floor and bin Laden was there and he was a threat and we killed him. Essentially was the story. We. And he goes, well, you're right. And I regretted that the minute I said it. I should have just told the truth and what happened, blah, 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 blah. And then he says, I don't know who your sources are, but they're good.
But is Red still alive?
And I said,
okay.
Yes. He's just active with our government in a
and you legitimately know Red? Like you don't
I don't know him.
His
I
name?
know his name.
Have you ever spoken to him?
And I verified his role.
No. Okay, got it. Okay.
These guys, especially guys like him who's still active,
no,
you're
that's
never
crazy.
Going to speak to him. So I've spoken to guys that are on the team that are retired, who are on that mission, and it's a relatively small group of people who agree with Rob O'Neill. 99% of the special operations community and across all branches think he's full of shit. And Rob even said himself, he goes, sometimes I wonder if I'm a sociopath. And I would 100% agree. He's a sociopathic, a narcissistic sociopath. He can't stop himself from lying and seeking fame and seeking the attention. And he doesn't care if he's lying, and he doesn't care if he's making millions of dollars off of lies. He's just that kind of guy. And when he does the thing like you're talking about that went viral about, when he killed that guy in the middle of the night and what if he had met him in different conditions and blah, blah, blah. That's just Rob's PR people telling him to change, to add a little bit of compassion. Because even in his stories about bin Laden, after he shoots bin Laden, he says he sort of like lost it for a second because he saw his two-year-old child inside the room there. And he said, that's when the dad in me came out. And I just lost my focus. And I'm like, one of the guys from the team came up into the room and said, hey, you okay? And he goes, yeah, what do we do now? And the guy's like, we go and clear the building and take everything we can take. He goes, oh yeah, I'm back. That's like his movie version, Rob.
Yeah.
He does those kinds of things. He says that kind of stuff. So, but the realities are is that there's so many holes in his story, and nobody wants to publicly say, I was there, that didn't happen. Everybody just talks behind and off camera. If they weren't there, there are some that have an opinion that weren't there, that have vocalized that opinion. But most of the guys on that mission won't come out and say the truth because Red doesn't want to be identified and Red is still working. So Rob did put out a tweet the other day that he since took down. And there's a documentary film that's out on Netflix that clearly is CIA funded, since everybody in the movie is a CIA analyst or operator.
Which one?
And then Rob O'Neill. I don't know what the title is. It just came out 6 weeks ago.
Yes,
Hunting
you know
bin
what?
Laden
I started watching that. I got 5 minutes into it, and I was like, "This is such propaganda. This is ridiculous." I couldn't even get through it. Yeah, that stuff that comes out. I mean, gosh, potentially everything that comes out, but stuff like that comes out, especially on Netflix, I don't put any stock into that.
And it's not truly a documentary.
Right.
It's a pseudo informational propaganda piece.
That's like a recreation. Yeah, it was terrible. It was terrible.
So Rob is out promoting that documentary, and someone must, and I don't know what the genesis of the tweet was, but the tweet was, "You want me to tell Red's story? I've kept that motherfucker out of jail all this time."
That's what Rob tweeted?
Yeah. He tweeted and then he deleted it. Now, Rob is known to be a drunk texter and a drunk tweeter. He's got a little bit of a drinking problem. I've been the recipient of some of his angry.
So minus the drunkenness, he's kind of like Trump with his mean tweets.
Yeah, and he, I honestly don't think it has anything to do with the bin Laden raid. The tweet, I think it has to do with a different raid, because he wouldn't be dumb enough to add a CIA operative who is doesn't want to be identified, and that he has never publicly, was even on the raid. So I think that would be, but I'm sure there were other raids
about, hey, you want me to expose Red, I will, and then you're saying he deleted it.
Yep.
Okay, got it. All right.
Yes. So I mean, the long story is Rob is going to go to his grave with that line. He's never gonna, and that grave may be self-inflicted. I don't know, but he is not a guy that's going to come forward and be caught in a lie, say, you know what, they told me to do it, or I was just doing my job, or whatever. He's always going to ride that until the very end.
All right, so let me ask you this. I mean, do you think bin Laden was even there that day? Did whoever, whether it was Red or Rob or anybody, did they kill the real bin Laden that day or that night?
Well, there are obviously there are a lot of different stories on what that night was, and then whether or not that was really bin Laden. Do you know who Congressman
Kurt Weldon is, and we'll talk about that in a second. And the reason I just thought of that question is when you said a few minutes ago, when I said, when was this, 2009? You said 2011, just before the election. So all of a sudden in my mind, I'm like, holy shit, that was when Obama was ready to run for his second term. And again, people weren't that happy with his first term. I remember that. So I forget who he was up against, whether that was Mitt Romney or, okay, so that was Mitt Romney.
Yeah.
You know, could they have done that whole, we just killed Osama bin Laden, because they needed a win going into the election?
Well, I have two thoughts on that I'm willing to accept as probable, not possible. The probability of it not being bin Laden is 50-50 for me at best. What I do believe is that it was a coordinated CIA, Pakistani intelligence, Iranian intelligence, and Saudi intelligence basically threw bin Laden into the middle of that and knew that he was going to be killed. Like, I think that was, he had served his purpose. I believe he was probably dying already, and this was the end of the bin Laden story. And the best way to do that was to make sure that nobody got hurt, nobody responded, nobody did anything, and the good guys win. And SEAL Team 6 can be credited for it by, Obama and Biden at different times. And then the world can be happy that the world's most hated terrorist is dead and Obama wins his reelection. That's what I believe is the probable thing that happened. Now, if you listen to Kurt Weldon, who I'm a very big fan of, he was my congressman when I lived in Pennsylvania. He is a passionate guy for first responders and firefighters and law enforcement and the military. Was super powerful at the time when 9/11 happened, as far as his positioning in the House of Representatives and the different committees he was on. When 9/11 happened, he had doubts. And he had doubts on the genesis of it. He had doubts on the planes actually bringing the buildings down. He had doubts on, there's a lot of things he had doubts on, and he publicly said those things. And they went after him and pretty much got him removed from office in 2006. They primaried him and he got beat. And it was a lot of deep state money that went into his the person that primaried him, and he just got outspent and outworked at the game. But it did, and then he went quiet because they went after his daughter.
He went quiet from 2006, quite frankly, to 2 months ago when he went on Tucker Carlson. And now, obviously there's a lot more attention being brought back to Kurt Weldon. I know he was a skeptic of 9/11 for sure. Was he a skeptic of the bin Laden killing?
Well, he was a skeptic of where bin Laden was.
Okay.
And who knew that. So I have a source he's not anonymous. He is and he's got his own credibility. His name's Nick Noe, N-O-E. He was an Air Force intel guy, whistleblower for Benghazi. And he befriended a guy named Alan Perot, who was the falconer for all of the Middle East royalty. So teaching
falconer. Literally like teaching people how to I think Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is a big falconer. Okay.
Yeah. So that's obviously a wealthy pastime. And one of the four sources that Kurt Weldon had that Iran was involved in the removal and hiding of Osama bin Laden was Alan Perot, the falconer, who had received word that the falcons that he trained for Osama bin Laden were in Iran. And which means that, they don't travel without their falcons. It's this, I don't know why, but they don't. So if the falcons are there, that means the person that controls the falcons are there, and that means that the person who owns all of it is there. So, and that was four different independent sources that Kurt Weldon had saying that Osama bin Laden was in Iran. And that's a fact that lends to the story of what happened to Osama bin Laden after 9/11, right? Was he in Tora Bora? Was he in the caves of Afghanistan? Was he in the caves of Pakistan? Was he in Islamabad? Where was he? He was definitely in Iran for quite a while. And I believe he was sent to Pakistan not long before the raid.
Okay. All right.
That's my gut says that's what happened. Now, I know the other side is that it was a body double and
I think what you're saying is completely plausible, and mainly because I feel like bin Laden served his purpose for the deep state, and we'll talk about that in a second. And yeah, they're probably like, okay, he served his purpose. Now on the chessboard, let's move him to this compound in Pakistan. And then we need something to rally the American people. We've got an election coming up. Let's take bin Laden out with SEAL Team 6. And then maybe Red didn't want the glory. And they said, Rob, you're going to get the glory. And Rob said, okay, I'll take it. Oh, God, who knows?
There's no doubt in my mind that there was a coordinated, Rob didn't go solo. The brand is a very strategic moving entity.
Dude, this is fascinating. This is absolutely fascinating. Okay, let's end on the bin Laden thing, because I feel like we just literally concluded one episode right there. So at the bottom line for you do think that was bin Laden that day, but you think there was a coordinated effort to basically, like, he had served his purpose, kind of like what I just said, and so he got taken out at that point. That is kind of where you think.
That would be my probability if I put everything in buckets, possible or probable. There's more probability that happened versus the body double or something else, simply because knowing his physical state with the dialysis and all that kind of stuff, even though Rob said they made that lie up. I have multiple people that says it's real, that he was probably terminal, and they just basically allowed it to be our win that he was captured.
You know what?
Or killed, so.
We might have to come back and do another episode after I watch the other 2 episodes that you, Rob, and Jeremy did. But let's table that for a second. Let's get into your friend Jobe, and I think this is where I want to kind of go for the rest of this episode. Give us the story about Jobe Price.
So Jobe and I we were high school friends in school. We didn't hang out of school. I didn't go to his house. We were in the same classes for 4 years because we're both on the college preparatory academic track, and we both were pursuing military appointments at an academy. He went to the Air Force Academy. I ended up enlisting in the Army. Long story on that. But he went to the Air Force for his commission to the Navy. When he graduated, became a Navy SEAL. 19 years, he worked his way up in multiple different teams and different positions of leadership, and was on the admiral track, is what I was told by everybody in that was in the know back in that time, which is a very select group of people who have that type of leadership skill set and charisma and the ability to hold lots of responsibility. So he took command of SEAL Team 4 right before his deployment to Afghanistan. So in the summer of 2012, he took over SEAL Team 4. They deployed Afghanistan, relieving SEAL Team 2, which just had a horrific deployment. And several members of SEAL Team 2 were accused of killing an Afghani local, tortured him, along with the Afghan National Police and Afghan local police. And a day later, after they released him, he dies from his injuries. So retribution was called on the military, on the Navy, for that death. Team 4 takes over SEAL Team 2. SEAL Team 2 never sees that retribution. SEAL Team 4, Jobe Price, commander, did not know about the retribution. They relocate the base camp where SEAL Team 2 was. They moved it 60 miles away or 60 kilometers away, which isn't a very far travel for the Taliban. Set up camp, and shortly after taking over in September, a couple Army guys were killed. They were intel guys that were killed on a green on blue, which means Afghan local police or national police killed them accidentally, supposedly. And then 2 guys in November, 2 SEALs in November were killed, Matt Cantor and Kevin Ebert. I've had conflicting reports on which one was an ambush and which one wasn't, but the most recent description to me was Matt Cantor, the first one, was an ambush and was the retribution from the Taliban for what happened to the local with SEAL Team 2. Kevin Ebert was very close to Jobe. Jobe took that one pretty hard. But Jobe was not Jobe growing up was an affable, goofballish kind of class clowny, but very, very smart, athletic, captain of the football team, captain of the wrestling team. Wasn't a drinker or anything like that. He was very straight-laced. Throughout his career, he was known as an exceptional leader, task-oriented, detailed-oriented, expected a lot out of the people around him. And I think when he got to SEAL Team 4, the prior commander there didn't have that kind of leadership style. It was a more relaxed style. And Jobe came in and demanded military bearing and that they would act professional and show up on time and act like they're in the military. They're not CIA ground branch. They're the Navy SEALs. A lot of guys didn't like that. So on top of what happened with the 4 deaths, which is never good. If you're a commander, you don't want to have 4 guys die on your tour.
So it sounds like Jobe was structured, disciplined, but also like kind of lived by some ethics and somewhat of a code of honor of humanity and I guess empathy, for lack of a better way of putting it, right?
Yeah, and he just wanted things to be done the right way. And there was a lot of wild west, they say over there, right? A lot of things were happening. And this was at a period of time when the CIA was sending over pallets of cash called ASOT money, ASOT, advanced specialized something training. I can't remember the exact meaning of the acronym, but every special operations unit had a cachet of money available to them to use to pay off informants, buy off mullahs, If you kill the wrong family member, you pay off the family. Like, this money was used for a lot of things. Shortly before Jobe died, he had uncovered that $40,000 was missing from the ASOT money. And a guy named Wemo, who was a SEAL, his code name, I'm not going to give his real name, was a SEAL Team 6 guy that got kicked out of SEAL Team 6 and assigned to SEAL Team 4. Apparently, he had been running roughshod, thinking that he was still SEAL Team 6, could do whatever he wanted with the ASOT money. It wasn't documenting where the money was going. Jobe approached him and said, you got 48 hours to put that money back. And then 48 hours later, Jobe is dead.
Oh, shit.
And a week before Jobe died, a guy named Tim Szymanski, who is pretty much the point of the spear for the entire Navy SEAL syndicate. He's the guy at the top. He was the one that planned the mission for Roberts Ridge. He was, I believe he was head of Group 2, which is East Coast SEALs at the time when Jobe died. Ended up becoming a vice admiral, was number 2 at Joint Special Operations Command, ran SEAL Team 6. He was a very, very, very powerful guy. Grew up in church with the Biden family in Wilmington, Delaware. I'm told that he had direct access to Bill and Hillary Clinton whenever he wanted it. Didn't have to make an appointment. Could walk into the office, close the door, and sit.
What's this guy's name again?
Demand time. Tim Szymanski, Szymanski.
That's funny.
Szymanski.
I think
retired vice admiral.
This is kind of like my what fills up 90% of my brain. Szymanski. I swear that's like a character in the Top Gun movies too. I think it was. I think it was. Okay, that's funny. All right, go on.
So Tim Szymanski, Bob Smith, who was a captain at the time, and a guy named Sean Pybus, who was, I want to say a rear admiral maybe at the time. But they were all in country, and apparently Jobe had it out with Szymanski in his office, and it was overheard by someone out in the hallway. The details of the conversation, I've had multiple different accounts, but they weren't good. I know Jobe was frustrated with the fact that he had to do early morning and evening raids when there was daylight. Wanted to do more. One of the things that the Navy likes and the Air Force, everyone is control the night. We do more at night because we have all the advanced technology to allow us to do things at night in a much more safe and clandestine way. But they were doing these raids during the day. And Jobe had a problem with that. And after Kevin died, Kevin Everett, at the end of November, Jobe kind of pulled back on the operational pace that the guys were keeping because he didn't want to send them out into places where it was less safe than it could be if they had planned the mission in a more clandestine way. So guys weren't happy with that. Brass wasn't happy. He wasn't happy with Brass. So that's kind of like the layout of what was going on before Jobe died. So, and there was also some investigations into impropriety with sexual assault of local Afghanis by members of the team that he was investigating. And he had told his wife a couple days before he died that I'm going to have to do a lot of things I don't want to do when I get back. A lot of things happened over here. And he didn't get into detail, never did with her. But that was kind of I'm going to kill myself over what happened.
Yeah, kind of like I'm going to whistleblow on this stuff, but I wouldn't even call it whistleblowing. I'd call it just kind of telling the truth and telling his truth and being a leader and having integrity. So, okay, all right. So this ASOC money was missing. He confronts the guy that, he knows takes it, or, multiple people. And so, I mean, I'm going to assume you think one, if not that group, took him out.
I don't want to accuse anybody of murder, but I can tell you that I do know who did it. And I do know that it was more than one person who was involved in the cover up. So I'll lay out the murder for you. Jobe was found dead in his bunk on December 22nd, 2012, at about 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning by Command Master Chief Peeler. And I misspoken. Peeler was not the Command Master Chief of SEAL Team 6 during the Rob O'Neill raid. It was a different Command Master Chief. Peeler was Jobe's Command Master Chief. He was found dead. He notifies the JAG officer who was nearby, the lawyer guy who was an officer attached to the team, notified the rest of the command staff, notified the NCIS agent on base. They all confirm he's dead. The NCIS agent then locks the door to Jobe's bunk, gives the key to Jeff Peeler and says, don't go in there and don't do anything to the room. He leaves and comes back 9 hours later. Now Jobe is still in the bunk, still dead. And now the room, the crime scene, is controlled by the very people who who in any investigation would be suspects until proven otherwise through the investigation of something potentially, right? There's a dead person with a gunshot to the head. We have to investigate this to decide whether or not this was a homicide or a suicide. So that's law enforcement 101. So 9 hours later, they come back, they process the crime scene poorly, take some photos, discs, they put them on discs. Discs were destroyed and no copies were made on some of the photos. So we're missing an entire piece of the crime scene photograph array because of a destroyed disc. And typically if you're going to investigate a shooting and supposedly the gun is still present, you want to test for gunshot residue on the person if you think it's a suicide or not. You're going to test the person who is in close proximity to the gun, which Jobe had a gun supposedly resting in his hand with it gently across his chest under his chin. They test for gunshot residue, but they didn't test it from his hand. They didn't test it from his arm. They didn't test it from anywhere on the backblast area. They tested the sheet underneath him, and they tested the board that was underneath his mattress for gunshot residue, which is makes no sense whatsoever. The gun, they did ballistics on it to determine that the bullet and casing came from that gun that was found in the room, but there was no DNA testing done. There was no fiber testing done. There was no brain matter, skull matter, blood, hair, anything tested on that gun to determine whether or not it was even used to commit the suicide. All they did was say that the gun and the bullet and the casing matched. I could go outside right now, shoot a gun, retrieve the bullet, take the casing, take that gun casing and bullet and put it anywhere and leave it there. That doesn't mean that it was used. It just means it's present in the crime scene.
Yeah, it makes total sense.
That makes sense.
Kind of like how the JFK bullet casing ended up on the gurney in the hospital. Yeah, dude, that's crazy. Right. Okay, go on.
So it makes no sense. The things they're testing, the DNA they tested on the bullet was because the bullet was sitting in Jobe's blood when they found it. So they just verified that the blood was Jobe's. They didn't verify whether or not there was any trace evidence for brain matter or bone fragment or hair or skin, which would be present on a round that transferred from one temple to the other temple and exited. It would be on there. Every bullet has it. You can't go through all of those substances and not take it with you on some level. There was no fingerprint done on the casing. There was no latent fingerprint pulled on the casing to determine who loaded that bullet, or whether or not there was another fingerprint on it at all. The 9 hours is a big deal.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. They left him alone dead for 9 hours. That's insane.
And crime scenes are important to have integrity, right? So if you're going into court and you say, yeah, I showed up and then I left and I came back 9 hours later, but trust me, everything's still the same. Right? Nothing's changed. And you can't make that assumption. And so when you're thinking about how do you cover up a crime, you start by making it so that none of the evidence can be admissible. If you mess up from the very moment you start and you have no integrity in a crime scene, and you then, God forbid if they actually did their job and found out it was a homicide, they'd never be able to prove who did it because all of the evidence was tampered with potentially, right? And would be considered fruit of the poisonous tree. So
you just described the O.J. Simpson crime scene. Exactly.
Pretty much. So the coup de grace is as the NCIS agent was releasing Jobe's body to the medical people, he told the Command Master Chief Peeler that no one is to touch Jobe's body. No one's to do anything to his body. And in his notes, he says, I did not believe that Command Master Chief Peeler was going to adhere to my command. And this is an officer telling an enlisted guy, don't fucking do it. So the medical people come, take Jobe, take his sheets, his sleeping bag, everything that's going to go with him to back to Dover when he gets the medical examination. It all goes in the body bag. It's all part of the evidence. So it gets back to the medical tent, and the Navy SEALs command the medical people to remove the bags that they had placed on his hands with evidence tape. That was to preserve any blood evidence that was on his hand or gunshot residue. Supposedly, in Law Enforcement 101, you're supposed to take the test at the scene, and then a secondary test is done of the same thing back at the medical examiner's office, so you can compare the two to make sure you're getting the same result. That's how it's supposed to be done. They didn't do any GSR testing or DNA testing on Jobe's hands, but they bagged him. And then he was naked when he was found in his bed, clutching his pillow in his left hand, which he did every single night.
Naked when he was found?
Okay. He slept naked. Okay. Yeah, he slept naked every night, and he slept with his left arm with the pillow between his head. That's how he slept every night. That's how he was
How
found
did,
holding that
anyone
pillow.
know that's
His
how he
body
slept every
position.
night? That's what his wife said or something?
Yeah, his dad told me that he always slept naked. Like his family knew that
Okay.
Jobe was a nude sleeper. So that's just, for me, when you're looking at something as a probability of suicide,
Sure.
there's a lot of things that you look for to determine, and one of them which is not he was sleeping in the manner which he always slept, and then all of a sudden in the middle of the night decided to shoot himself.
Okay. So what you're saying is the fact that they found him sleeping in the manner that he already slept is something that probably shows he did not commit suicide. Because why would? Okay,
It's a checkbox in the
got it.
not
Okay,
suicide
got it.
column. If you're
Yep.
just taking circumstantial stuff, when
Yeah,
you're formulating
give us
an
the
investigative
check
opinion.
boxes that you came out with after going through all this of the not committed suicide.
So number one was the 9 hours, right? That number one. Number two was the position he was in on the bed. He was naked with the pillow clutched in his arm, but he was laying on his back with his head facing away from the direction he was shot, and he was holding the gun in his hand in a very weird position. That in and of itself, the way his body came to rest with the gun in his hand, I couldn't come to terms with how, based on the fact that he was on his side when he was left side when he was shot, how did he end up on his back with his pistol on his chest and his head facing the opposite direction? I couldn't wrap my head around that. Number three was the fact that he was naked and clutching the pillow, which I determined through talking to family and friends that's how he slept every night. Number four was the ineptitude in the investigative process where photographs were missing and blah, 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 all the snafus within the processing of the crime scene. And then the washing of the body. They took his bags off his hands, washed his entire body from head to toe, removed every ounce of trace evidence, rebagged his hands, and then dressed him in his uniform and a watch cap and dressed his head wound. So they completely tampered with the entire crime scene vessel, which is his body, and any associated stuff around him, like his sheets and his pillow and all that stuff. All are evidence.
And by the way, you found all this out through the report that's filed, because I'm assuming this is all happening in Afghanistan. Neither his family or anyone knows, right? Like at this point, no one, his dad or his wife had not flown over to Afghanistan to be there with the body or anything, right? Okay.
Nope. No, so the body came back Christmas morning.
Jesus.
The Dover airfield. Yeah. After they were asked by the wife not to do that because they didn't want the daughter to be like crushed that every Christmas now is the day that her father came home dead. The realities are is that, after the report was done, and the Army did one, it was like 375 pages long of statements and all this stuff. And then the Navy did one that was about 300 pages long.
And they give you guys access to all that? Like that was their...
That's all.
Say it again?
Yeah. We had to do a Freedom of Information Act request to get all that. I did have stuff from his wife that she had given me that she'd already gotten prior to me getting involved in the investigation. But my agreement was with Jobe's dad and sister. I made the promise to them that I was going to investigate this until completion. I have never been paid. I will never be paid. I volunteered thousands and thousands of hours of my life to this investigation.
Yeah, you know what? You told me that in our first conversation, and I want to stress that, and everybody needs to understand. You literally did not make a dime off of this, nor did you ask for a dime off of this. You did this because the dad and the sister. And again, what's crazy is it's not like this was your best friend from high school. When we initially got on the phone, I think I said, "Was this your best friend from high school, or was this somebody you were super close with?" And you're like, "No, not really. He was somebody I went to high school with, and yeah, we were friends, but I can't say, that wasn't like my guy." And as soon as you told me that, I was like, wow, this is amazing. Then I thought, okay, he must have done it for the money. I'm just being honest with you. And then literally you're like, I never got paid a dime. And then that's when I was like, this is fascinating. We've got to talk about this more.
It's, so my agreements with them, like the promise I made to them is that I will see this through. And I'm not gonna lie, it's been hard for 6 years. And it wasn't until the Rob O'Neill interview that things started to change, because I realized that talking about Jobe in that first interview, just a small amount as I did, and the number of thousands and thousands of views it got, I was like, wait a second. If I can talk about Jobe while being on a conversation that's about something more mainstream that people would know about, like Osama bin Laden, the raid, that I'm getting more eyes on Jobe. So I'm like, all
did
right,
Rob
did
Rob get uncomfortable when you were talking about Jobe, or he had so there's no connection, correlation whatsoever. And it's not like He had heard
about
about it. Okay, got it.
Yep. And we talked about in the other two interviews, we talked about John Chapman's incident, Jobe, extortion, and what was the other one?
Okay, all right.
Mark Luttrell. And so we talked about those things in order to get him on tape talking about controversial topics. So had I not used the template of attaching Jobe's name to famous SEAL corruption and getting people interested in what I was saying about the corruption, and then, as a byproduct, learning about Jobe's case and how screwed up that was, I wouldn't be where I am today, where I have multiple forensic experts who have reached out to me and then reviewed everything and came out with the things that I thought didn't look right. I didn't know why they didn't specifically look right as a forensic. I'm not a forensics guy, but I'm knowing blood flow pattern. Blood can't flow in multiple directions. That means the body was moved. The way that the gun was placed in the hand, 100% was placed post-mortem. Like there's so many variables that came out that every one of these guys that have looked at this case have all said independently for no money.
Okay, so let me ask you this. So is this a closed case, or are you guys and the dad and the sister, are you still trying to get resolution? And then is the United States government or military or Navy or whoever, is it a shut case for them, or is it still open?
It's a closed case. And the hard part is getting them to listen to reopen it. And I've offered multiple different outcome exit ramps for them. I was working with Pete Hegseth, who's the Secretary of Defense. When he was at Fox News, he was helping me get exposure. He has confirmed to me in writing that he believed Jobe was murdered and that a silencer was used on his head, which there are photos that show stippling burns, which is just the gunpowder burns on the skin in a semicircle pattern, which would be conducive to a
Hegseth
being
gave this
fired.
to you in writing obviously before he was.
Yes.
Yeah, while he was at Fox. I'm sure right now he's probably not even going to answer your call.
I've texted him and emailed him and called him, and I've had people that know him that are reaching out to him. What I need is this. I don't want to be the SEAL guy. Like, I have no desire to do this anymore. I'm retired. I do not enjoy any of this, but I do have the conviction and intestinal fortitude to see it through. And I'm okay with, if the outcome is burn the whole village to the ground in order to get Jobe justice, then I do that. But I have given them multiple exit ramps that doesn't create any ripples outside of just
got
Jobe's
it. I see what
case.
you're saying.
Because I can connect a lot of dots to
you
that.
can connect so basically, because of the interviews with Rob, really from Jeremy's show, you're saying, from Slay USA, that kind of triggered a thought process in you that, bringing attention to these more popular SEAL team situations brings attention to Jobe's situation, but you're at a point where you're willing to let the rest slide, but you want to get justice here. But obviously it doesn't sound like they're going to get they're going to even give you justice. So let me ask you two questions. Question one. So what was your conclusion? You concluded that he was murdered, but you didn't necessarily. Okay, by his own guys. But then you don't have to name names, but do you point fingers as to who those guys were, or do you just say his guys?
Well, they were very good at destroying evidence. So any evidence that would have pointed to a person, as far as physical evidence or fingerprints or gunshot residue on someone's hands or whatever, was all destroyed. So the ability to prove who did it would only come from someone who was there that knows who did it and says so, and is willing to testify, or the person who did it.
Okay.
Do you know
the people that were there?
I do know.
Okay.
Yes. But I know everybody that was on that deployment, and I know who was.
But you don't say those names in public, right? Or have you?
No.
Okay.
No. Well, I've said names in public. I haven't associated any of them with.
Got it. All right.
But I have said their names in public.
But you haven't said they are the ones that. Okay, got it. Fair.
No.
Fair.
again,
I
there's
feel
a
you.
dance that
I
has to
feel
be
you.
done in
I
order
feel
to be
you.
done.
And that actually
So
leads to my second question. Dude, you got a set of balls on you. Jesus Christ. Like you're messing with the Navy SEALs, which is part of the Navy, which is part of the US government. Have you ever gotten a knock at the door or a phone call from an unknown number that basically, or something in the mail or something that says, you might want to zip it?
Google voice calls are very good that people use to
Yeah.
make threats. So I've gotten several of those in the
Like you
past, in
answer
the
the
last
phone
6
and it's
years.
a real human being on the other side
It's a real human
that
being.
speaks to
Yes.
this, that says, hey, you need to stop looking into this?
Yes. Yes. It's bad for your health if you keep pushing this. And I'm like, all right, well, then get me who killed Jobe. I'll stop. Like, I
That's
don't know what to
wild.
tell you, but I know what I know, and I know how it happened. I know who did it. I know who participated in the cover up, and I know who knows about it and stayed quiet.
That's wild.
And, if I get an opportunity, I will name every single name. And everyone can say what they want, but Discovery's a motherfucker. And if anybody wants to go to Discovery with me,
Yeah.
I got receipts. And I don't believe anyone else wants to have that conversation.
Okay.
And again, I've offered exit ramps that require nothing other than
Yeah,
a
I hear
computer
you. I
keystroke.
hear you on that.
All they have to do is switch it from suicide to homicide, and I walk. They can close the case, make it a cold case. They can say no evidence exists to investigate further, whatever they want to do. But Jobe's pension and his life insurance policy will then be released to his wife.
So because
and
it's a
daughter.
suicide, the wife does not get the pension or the life insurance?
Correct. He was 6 months shy of 20 years vesting.
Okay. That is.
So, again,
No,
I'm
I
not
hear
doing
you.
it for
What's your
her per
relationship
se,
with the wife
but
and
but
then
it would.
the dad and sister these days?
The wife has gotten better. She and I have sort of had to come to Jesus, so to speak, and things are better. And I'm thankful for that because she could have always been an asset to me to help because she is the widow
Did she
of the
not?
Navy SEAL
Did she
commander
not
who
want
died.
to
Oh, and
help?
by the
Like,
way,
did she not help?
she did a lot of work on her own for years. And then when I took over, and there was some lack of communication, I would guess you would call it, where I just haven't heard from her in a really long time. Recently, I'd made some comments about her that she did not appreciate, and she reached out to me. And I'm like, well, I said, I appreciate you reaching out, but where were you for the last 5 years? But now we're back. We worked through some of that. And, I do believe she wants to get to the truth. And, if I'm doing it, Jobe's dad died last April. That is not this past April, but the April before. So he never got to see this to fruition, but he knew I was close. His sister is still really the only one that has been with me from day one fighting this fight. Jobe's daughter deserves to have all of the memory and honor and dignity and legacy that her father earned, and he did not kill himself. And I've asked every SEAL, long live the brotherhood is their credo. And I said, well, where's Jobe's brotherhood? Where are they? Why is he the name that shall not be spoken? What did he do to deserve to be dead? And by the way, in the entire greater war on terror, do you know how many commanding officers in any branch of service committed suicide in the country? Zero. Jobe would be, if he had committed suicide, would have been the only one. And there was no, everyone says he didn't appear suicidal. He was depressed and a little lethargic and a little withdrawn. But again, I know a lot of people that fit that bill are still
that's
alive.
Like 90% of the country.
It's
right
not
now.
right. So I don't. There is zero evidence that he committed suicide. Not one single stitch of evidence that leads anyone with any ability to discern whether it's scientifically or investigatively that he committed suicide. Other than they told us he did.
All right, listen, man, that was a quintessential deep, shallow dive that definitely was very deep. Let's do this, Matt, because actually, it's funny. I had texted Jeremy when you first reached out to me. I said, hey, this guy reached out to me. He wants to talk about this. I just wanted to get your vibe. He's like, literally, Jeremy said, do as many episodes with Matt as you can. He's a fan favorite and he's honest and he brings receipts. So first of all, I appreciate today. I think this was incredibly informative. I think just having, your perspective on the Navy SEALs to the Osama bin Laden stuff to then obviously the most important part of this was Jobe. And, I give you so much respect for really trying to honor your friend's legacy and his memory, because it sounds like from everything that I read about him and that you've said, this guy deserves it. His daughter deserves it. His wife deserves it. His dad deserves it. And that's sad that he had to pass away. But I bet you gave his dad some comfort. I really think you did. In your efforts over the 6 years, I'm sure you gave his dad a tremendous amount of comfort, and then obviously his sister. But
well,
yeah.
I'll tell you, can I just interject real quick there? Well, I will say this, and I have never once and never will espouse that Jobe and I were super close, because it has nothing to do with the fact that I'm an investigator and that's what I do. Why I'm doing it is because I'm a pit bull who makes promises and I keep my promises. And number two, I'm egocentric. I want to win. I want to solve this crime. But I met with Jobe's dad a couple of weeks before he died. I went home to Pennsylvania, spent a couple hours with him, and he was dying of cancer and sitting in his chair. And I said, I'm really sorry that I wasn't able to bring this home for you. I said, and I really wish I'd have been Jobe's closer friend to Jobe growing up, because I would have loved to get to know you a whole lot more. Like, he was a great man, a great man. And I said, I'm a little disheartened that I didn't really get to know you as well as I could have. I said, but we are where we are, and we met how we met. And he goes, Matt, can I tell you this? And I said, what's that? And he said, you may not have been Jobe's best friend when he was alive, but you're the very best friend he's ever had since he died.
That's amazing.
And me, that means more, because I don't have a history. I don't have stories to tell from our youth.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have any of those things. I didn't go to camp with them or whatever. So I want people to recognize I don't sell hope. So that's why I don't take money. I've had other Gold Star families reach out to me wanting me to investigate there, and there's dozens of these. Jobe is not an anomaly. And I can't do it because first of all, I don't have the mental bandwidth or the emotional capacity to do this again. But B, I would only be able to do it if I charged. And then I would hate myself because I'm selling hope to somebody. And that's not what I do. So I appreciate the comments you made and the fact that Jeremy gave me that review. And again, he's right. We've done very well since January of 2024 on every podcast I've ever done.
Okay.
Because it's a topic that people don't know about. They don't believe that this could happen in their elite fighting forces and that our government would participate in the cover up. But they have. All
right, we're going to do this. I am going to watch all 3 of those episodes in order to give myself some background, and then we're going to set up another recording session together. And I want to get into the deep state, and I want to get into all that, because I think you have a really, really good perspective on all that. So, all right, listen, everybody. Oh man, tagline is call a spade, and Matt has absolutely done that. But again, I just want to say thank you for kind of telling us this story and telling us Jobe's story, and hang on the line and look forward to part 2 together, buddy.
Thank you, man. I appreciate the opportunity.
This episode was brought to you by the new book, Deep Shallow Dive Into You, available now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble in hardcover and paperback. Don't forget to sign up for our new mailing list on our website at deepshallowdive.com.